Hello, welcome to Billy Net Joe's Rant. Something I've been thinking about recently are references, specifically making references. Even more specifically, the fact that if you make a reference to something really old, then most people, well, they won't even bat an eye. But if you reference something super new, and keep in mind this is specifically on the internet, you will most likely be responded with, "You topical fool, how dare you reference something so new?" And if you happen to be a company just trying to appeal to kids doing that, then I'd say, yeah, that is pretty embarrassing for you, company. But if you're just a person doing it, like, just a normal person, just referencing something recent that you really liked, sure, go for it. And I'm not old enough to confirm this, but this may not even be a recent trend. Who knows, maybe back in the day, when Shakespeare was making references, or I guess in his time it would be allusions, to other pieces of media, people back then were like, pish posh, Shakespeare referencing, I don't know, some other piece of work? Topical fool. Writers these days will never understand the timeless masterpiece that is Ooga Booga Caveman Drawing number 4005. Sure, it may come across a little cowardice that I say making references to more modern pieces of media is perfectly acceptable, as I always reference historical crap and stuff. But I'd just like to put it out there, it's perfectly fine. Who knows, maybe things today, in a few dozen years, will be the new era of classics. I mean, there's no way to tell, I don't have a time machine. History's just like that. Things happen, and then things inspired by those things happen. And sometimes the inspirees don't get enough credit. I mean, how often have you heard Joseph Haydn was one of the first people to surprise people with a jump scare? Probably not often. Unless you recently took a music class. But maybe that's the whole point anti-referentiers are trying to make, is that they're saying making references is unoriginal and will not create new history. And I guess that's true, but if you make reference in conjunction with other things, then it will. It may not always be good history, but it's a start. Or a third possibility, anti-referentiers are just people who don't like other people having fun, and not historians. But why am I even talking about this, really? Talking about things that aren't fun are not nearly as fun as talking about things that are fun. For example, Oreos. And Oreos were created over 100 years ago, so no one's raising any eyebrows right now. But really, what I want to talk about Oreos is not necessarily the obvious choice, the whole, how do you eat Oreos? Do you twist off the top? Do you lick the center? Do you twist off the bottom, even though there's nothing left to twist off of? Or do you just eat it like a sandwich, like the name implies, sandwich cookies? If you do, you're not very fun, because licking it is obviously the better choice, but I'm not here to take sides, I'm just saying licking it's the best choice. What I want to talk about is the stuff. Yeah, the stuff, with only one F. Because I recently noticed that there's only one F in stuff. Double stuff, 1.5 stuff, quarter stuff, no stuff, in which case you're just buying chocolate animal crackers. Don't tell anyone. That's 100% a joke. Oreo cookies are not repurposed animal crackers, because I've never tried an animal cracker, obviously, because that would be cannibalism. Ick. On the topic of ick, I'd like to interview the person who decided to call the stuff between the Oreos stuff, because that's not exactly the most appealing name. What is the stuff? I don't know. Probably, cream or something. Vanilla cream or something, whatever flavor it is. Synthetic vanilla, the flowers that it's made of are plastic. But then again, stuff does not necessarily just imply gross stuff. This isn't Oreo's giblet flavors, now with 40% extra spleen. No, stuff could just be actually appealing to the market, because I like eating stuff, S-T-U-F-F, as in food stuff, so naturally I would also like eating food stuff, S-T-U-F. Why did I decide to talk about Oreos right now? Well, I'm simply fulfilling my New Year's resolution, which is a reference I'm sure a lot of people will not get, because this is the first episode in a new set of episodes. So the smart thing would be not referencing previous things. But hey, referencing things, that's a tie-in to when I said referencing things. Wow, aren't I clever? No, I'm not.
Hey, it's me, Tenerbot.
Tenerbot, wow, what brings you around here?
You're the only one round here, ha ha ha.
Oh, physical insults. Tenerbot, is this the next step in insulting evolution from usually just calling me dumb?
Yes. Thank you for noticing, Sewer Gurgler. I've decided to try and become even more antagonistic this year.
I wish you luck in your endeavors, Tenerbot. But could you try these new strategies, somewhere else?
I could. But you're my favorite stack of marshmallows held together by bones and viscera. I'd never cheat you out of a good demeaning session.
Tenerbot, that's cruel. And besides, saying those kind of things is a horrible first impression, for this being the first episode of a new set. You really want people to think of you as just a bully?
Yes.
You're being ignored, you can't hurt me, Tenerbot,
Hey,
you don't
wait,
exist,
stop.
your words mean nothing,
Bruh,
you're just a
I'm
darn
like
computer
being
on
ignored.
wheels. Nothing you say
I
can
don't
affect
like
me in
this.
any way, and
I'm
you'd be better
telling.
off just doing something an actual
It's just
computers
a
do
prank.
good at doing, like helping someone with their homework or something. Maybe then you
Stop
could
ignoring
contribute
me.
something to society, you piece of rubbish, most
You are no
likely
fun
constructed by
man.
secondhand trash. Sure, ignoring bullies in real life may not always work, but when they're dumb robots, in this case, who don't understand the fundamentals of peekaboo, then it's pretty effective. But we're not here to talk about upsetting things like bullying, we're here to talk about Oreo stuffing. Be that the Oreo company stuffing the Oreos, or me stuffing the Oreos into me. Now, where was I? There are lots of fun flavors of Oreos, like Oreo flavored, and Oreo flavored but with more stuffing, and Oreo flavored but with less stuffing, for people who don't know how to buy just normal cookies. Or mint Oreos, which are great, until someone points out the fact that they taste like toothpaste, and then they're ruined. Cover your ears. Sorry. But hey, really, there's nothing wrong with the taste of toothpaste. It's mint. Mint is refreshing. It's a plant, like vanilla, and you don't see anyone complaining about the flavor of vanilla. That's because it's vanilla. Literally the definition of plain. Vanilla and plain are now symbolic in the language because of the fact it's so unremarkable that nobody has any critiques. It's not like it's mouthwash flavored, which is a thing you're specifically told not to swallow and instead just swish it around and spit it out. Unlike toothpaste, which usually is non-toxic, or I hope it's always non-toxic, because it's pretty easy to swallow something that's in your mouth. Speaking of things from my mouth, words. Words that I've been speaking. Words that have formed Billy Nut Joe's rant, of which I hope you enjoyed. Now excuse me as I close my eyes and run home really fast so that Tenerbot did not have a chance to reappear.
I know you're still here, squirrel. Don't make me chase you at an intimidating 7 miles per hour.
7? That's twice the speed I walk. Gee, seasons sure do change quick around here. Hello, welcome to Billy Nut Joe's Rant. Today, rather conveniently, I want to talk about snow. Not just snow that's on the ground, but snow before it touches the ground. I love snowflakes, they're delicious. Just make sure you're eating snowflakes outside if you're planning on it, because if it's inside, that might be poison. But hey, outside, fair game. It's like a free food delivery service, except the food is water, and in hardly satiating amounts. Snow is like rain, but more beautiful, as well as it is most often more destructive, unless you're in a monsoon or hurricane, or in snow's case, a blizzard or a avalanche, I guess. Although that's not really snow's fault. But yeah, like most weather, it can be really pretty, it can be really ugly. Sometimes both at the same time. Pretty physically, ugly metaphorically. Or simile-y, if you were to phrase it, the snow is like ugly. Alright, there's probably a better way to phrase that. The snow is as snow is. Although that simile is comparing snow with the simile of comparing snow as in it's like ugly. So I think I just broke English. Crumbs. Anyway, let's actually get to the topic. So as is already established, snow is beautiful. But do you know what else is beautiful? You! You're beautiful. And you are also unique. Just like a snowflake. It's commonly known that every single snowflake, despite the fact that there are billions and billions of them, and have been probably quintillions or septillions over the entire course of history, apparently every snowflake is unique. The reason snowflakes are all so unique, or so we've all heard, is that they're actually a special kind of shape called a fractal, which is like a shape that repeats really, 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 really often in on itself. So it's like sort of an infinite spiral downward, but it's not really infinite because it takes up an amount of space, and so it can't be limited. But even if you somehow manage to capture two snowflakes that look, to the naked eye, pretty similar, if you zoom all the way in, then you'll see, hey, that snowflake has a slightly different spiral than that snowflake, making them unique. Further cementing the everyone's unique snowflake metaphor. How heartwarming. Ironic, considering snowflakes are the exact opposite of warming. But hey, wait, the concept of fractals, isn't that sort of a super nerd thing? Yes, it is. And super nerds have not been around for the entire existence of human history. So before people knew about fractals, I guess all snowflakes were not unique. Because again, all they had were their eyeballs. And in fact, the snowflakes might have been even more similar than they are to the naked eye today. Because who knows what people 4,000 years ago, who knows how good their eyesight was? They didn't have ophthalmologists. But after the introduction of microscopes, I guess snowflakes became more unique, strangely. And I guess this is a strange instance because usually when a scientific discovery is made about something, It's that something wasn't what we originally thought, in a more negative way. Take Pluto, for example. I was not even alive when Pluto was a cool planet. Now it's just a dwarf planet. It just gets a consultation prize. Because nowadays, who even cares about Pluto? It's just somewhere out in like the Kuiper belt or whatever. Had they missed all those other asteroids and stuff? I don't know. Maybe they just took one picture of Pluto, took a really nice photo. Pluto got famous for a while, and then Pluto had about 1,000,000,000,000 sisters, and they all got more attention than Pluto. Poor Pluto. But snowflakes got lucky. They became more unique as time went on. And although Pluto's a dwarf planet, it's still pretty big. Probably about a whole lot bigger than a snowflake. But somehow it manages to be smaller than a snowflake. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of like, yeah. And going back to fractals, they're a lot closer to you than you may think. And I mean that very literally. Because most of your vital organs contain fractals. Because of course they would. Those scientists, they just love zooming in on things, don't they? So who knows, maybe fractals were discovered before microscopes. Because they've been in our heart the whole time. Maybe if Kuiper belt space dust had made its way into everyone's heart, then it would have been noticed before Pluto, and Pluto would have never had that small spike in confidence, and then a horrific downfall to where it is today, as something that 90s educational shows will teach children that will then have to be untaught. Ever see that movie Ant-Man, where the guy has the superpower of shrinking really, really small, and he like shrinks down to the atomic level, and there's all those like shapes and stuff? I don't know, I haven't seen the movie in a long time. I think that's what a fractal is. Or you could just, look it up. But watching a movie is generally funner. Although I'm not sure how creditable that movie is in terms of scientific accuracy, but I'll take a wild guess and say more credible than me. I mean, of course it's scientifically credible. What was I thinking? It uses big words like quantum, defibrillator, gluteus maximus, all that kind of stuff. It was probably co-written by a scientist. But hey, maybe you don't like superhero movies? That's okay. Everyone has different interests. But I'm assuming all living creatures enjoy consuming things. And on the topic of snow cones. Yeah, the gentleman's way of eating snow. Snow cones, you just can't put them down. They're that good. And also they have that horrible handle design that makes them actually impossible to put down. Because how are you going to rest it? You're going to wait for it to melt and then be contained in the cup so you can tilt it? No, then it'll just pour out. What are they thinking? That they I'm referring to is of course the ambiguous they that everyone refers to when they have a question about a broad subject. They is one of the most popular pronouns, after all, as it can refer to anyone. Easy example of what a pronoun is, in case you haven't heard of one before, is she shells by the seashore, which, depending on your pronunciation, can have 1 to 3 pronouns in it. You, he, she, we, they, but not but. But is a conjunction. Well, actually, maybe it could be used as a pronoun, but why would you? Why would you refer to someone as but? That's just mean. But back on the most recent relevant topic that could vaguely be traced back to our original, those triangular cones, I can definitely see their practical use. Put them in an office setting near the bubbler, and someone takes a sip, and you can't be loitering, but there's work to do. So of course you wouldn't be allowed to put your thing down. Yeah, we've already moved past that topic, haven't we? Let's think of another topic. Ooh, I know. How about the topic of enjoying things? More specifically, Billy Nut Joe's Rant, of which this has been, and I hope you enjoyed. Hello, welcome to Billy Nut Joe's Rant, and today I want to talk about something significantly less nerdy than what I usually like to talk about. On second thought, that was false advertising. I'm sorry, as this is still decently nerdy, but I'd say it's maybe a 4.5 out of 10, as opposed to my usual 7 or 8. But I think even if you're not a total fan of nerd-related things, I think you'll find this intriguing, as really anyone who's been alive for the past 30 years knows about Toy Story, an incredibly uninspired title to a very inspired movie. Now, the movie came out in 1995, surprisingly, because it looks a whole lot more modern than that. And sure, not all the textures are that realistic, and everything's flat, but hey, all the main characters are toys, so I think they look pretty realistic. Toys are often textureless and flat, so what's the problem? Well, Mr. Nut Joe, to address that problem that no one's asking, the issue that I'm going to be discussing about Toy Story today is a follow-up to that one time where I talked about censorship. Specifically, how I'm surprised that with how much more strict Disney has been with censoring their old stuff, that they've never once touched Toy Story, as far as I know. It's been the exact same way ever since those 90s VHSs that you find at the library, which every second are getting less and less relevant as well, I think even DVDs are outdated technology at this point, so like, oops. Why am I even surprised that Toy Story hasn't been censored, though? Isn't it just a goofy and funny kids movie? And while yes, it is goofy, and yes, it is funny, and yes, it is a movie, and yes, it is made for kids, some of the funny and made for kids are not necessarily compatible, as it has many adult jokes. Allow me to elaborate. One of the most famous lines in the movie, in a movie full of nearly almost all famous lines, the scene goes something like this. Woody says, "Yes, we're all very impressed with Andy's new toy." And Buzz says, "Toy?" And Woody says, "Yeah, toy. Toy. Toy." To which Buzz responds with the line, "I think the word you're searching for is Space Ranger." And yes, that is all fine and dandy. And most people stop the quote at that line. Because, of course, "I think the word you're searching for is Space Ranger." That's already a pretty humorous line that fits in with Buzz's character in the first movie. But then, the very next line is often overlooked and is the actual punchline to the whole exchange, where Woody says, "The word I'm searching for? I can't say. There are preschool toys present." Whoa! What kind of word is Woody actually looking for that he can't say because there are children's toys around? Could that word possibly be a swear word? Could the plastic cowboy have any chance of insinuating that he would call the identity-confused astronaut a swear word? Not only that, but he would call him a swear word in a G-rated film. That's for general audiences, in case you didn't know, because there's like a bajillion different film rating systems. The rating I'm searching for is G rating, and you can't insinuate swear words on a G rating, Woody, you silly goose. Now everyone, keep your horses held, because not 30 seconds later, in that exact same scene, another inappropriate reference is made. When Buzz is showing off his fancy space jetpack, and how he is actually a space ranger and can fly, they get into a whole, "I can fly, no you can't, I can fly, no you can't, no, I can fly, no you can't." And then Woody says, "Okay then, Mr. Lightbeer, prove it." Light beer. Not only is there a swearing insinuation, but there's also an alcoholic reference in the same scene in a G-rated film. Gee willikers, Woody, you can't say the word beer in a children's animated film. Maybe in a children's live-action film, because this was the 90s, but you can't say it in an animated film. Look at the consequences of your actions, Woody. You saying beer all those times has made me say beer 4 times. Look what a horrible influence you're having on children. Oh, really? I did not know that. Well, I guess in that case it's okay then. All charges are dropped. We're lucky Buzz wasn't called Buzz Hardier, or else Woody's play on words would have had a much more negative effect on children. Now, why did I pick Toy Story as the movie, as an example for my follow-up on talking about censorship when it's never been censored before? Really, because I've never seen anyone bring up those 2 examples, and I thought it would be interesting. But if you want a more clever reason, it's because the voice actor for Woody, a man by the name of Tom Hanks, also happens to play Elvis's manager in the Elvis movie. And last time I talked about censorship, I mentioned Elvis, so why not? Plus, I like Toy Story. And I think millions and millions of people will agree that Toy Story is pretty cool. Not exactly a controversial statement to make. Sure, all the world it establishes may not make all the logical sense, and there are a billion questions you can ask about what happens to toys when X happens, or how about under Y conditions? Have security cameras ever caught a toy moving? You know, like that one part in, I think, Toy Story 2, where all the toys are just moving around after dark? They have no cameras viewing it? Well, and I know I've said not to say this before, but come on. It's just a movie. Not everything needs to be super over-explained, because I bet if they did over-explain it, it would bring up more questions than answers. Thank you, Jelly. By the way, have I told you recently that I am very thankful for your amazing ability to project your thoughts into physical form? Because I am. So, in conclusion, what did we learn about censorship? Well, censors tend to go for the most obvious things, sometimes really subtle things, sometimes things for no reason, but we never really learned that in this lesson or the previous lesson in any meaningful capacity. So let's just say censors really don't like swearing, alcoholic reference, tobacco reference, smoking, that kind of stuff, or large amounts of nudity, or really any nudity at all. Gah! Stop the program! I mean, surely there's an exception for animals, right? No? There's nothing? Well, it looks like we've got our work cut out for us, Jelly. Get the black bars and pixelated strips. We have a future generation to save from witnessing animals doing normal things. This has been Billy Nectar's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Happy February, everyone. It's the month of love. Ironically, though, today's topic is going to be the complete opposite of that. Because as much as I love unicorns and rainbows and sugar and stuff, I also sometimes like to dip my legs into history. And I say dip my legs because if you just dip your feet into history, you won't get enough. You have to go a little bit deeper than that, because that's how history works. Remember a few years ago when I talked about Christopher Columbus and all the things that he did that made him really famous for being horrible? Well, do I have a story for you today if you enjoyed that one. Because today's topic is a lesser known, but equally as malicious, if not a bit stupider, colonist. Although uniquely to Christopher Columbus, you may actually know this guy from a Disney movie, more so than you know him from real life. And if that didn't give it away, I'm going to be talking about Captain John Smith. Who is Captain John Smith? Well, Captain John Smith arrived at Jamestown, a settlement along the east coast of the United States, and was actually a prisoner as he was sort of, arrested on the boat ride over, which is quite embarrassing. But hey, things didn't end up turning around for him, as later he went from being a prisoner to actually being the president and leader. But unfortunately, he was also a huge jerk and very strict, and so he backed down as president and leader after an assassination attempt. So, did things really get better? Captain John Smith also ended up being captured by the Algonquin tribe. And the Algonquins were like, who the heck is this guy, and why does he have such a weird beard? And so they brought him to the leader, Chief Powhatan, and Chief Powhatan says, you English really seem to suck at hunting. How about in exchange for food, you give us some of your stuff? And Captain John Smith's like, alright, fine, as long as you don't kill me. And so they made a nice agreement, which I'm sure Powhatan won't ever regret, because, what happens next? But wait, what about that whole Captain John Smith was going to be executed, but Pocahontas throws herself in front of the hammer to save his life? Yeah, that never happened. It was all fabricated by Captain John Smith in his book that he wrote about his adventures. I'm sure Powhatan wasn't very happy about that. He spared this man's life, and then he turns around and paints me as the bad guy. If I were him, I would have definitely sued. Not very kind. Although the Englishmen should have seen right through this story, because why would Pocahontas fall in love with this guy at first sight? He's not even that hot. It is also worth noting that at the time Captain John Smith said Pocahontas would have fallen in love with him in his fake romance story, she was only 10 years old. Yeah, think about that for a second. Creep. Anyway, if you're curious about who Pocahontas actually ended up with, she was later kidnapped and forced into marriage with another guy named John Rolfe. Although she was 18 that time, so it's a different kind of awful. Still awful, but, not Captain John Smith awful. Captain John Rolfe awful. Actually, no, he wasn't a captain. He's just plain old John Rolfe. Boring English guy. But looking on the bright side, at least Disney made a few $1 million off this grisly story. Funny thing about the Disney movie, of course it's massively historically inaccurate because it's partially based off Captain John Smith's account, also known as the worst possible source you could ever possibly source, worse than Wikipedia. When your teachers look over at your paper, they see Wikipedia? Oh, come on, you can't use Wikipedia. They see Captain John Smith. Can we go back to Wikipedia? In the Disney movie, Captain John Smith and the big governor guy both arrive at Virginia the same time. In reality, they both did end up going to Virginia, but at totally different times. So times totally different that they were not there at the same time. So my theory is the historical inaccuracies in the Disney movie are actually because it takes place in an alternate universe where everyone who's ever gone to Virginia goes there at the same time. And then none of the same things happen because this is an alternate universe where there are all the same people who went to Virginia, but at the same time. So they don't sell any tobacco, which would have made a more interesting movie. Other more specific differences I've noticed is that in real life, Pocahontas served as an Algonquin to English, English to Algonquin translator. So she kind of helped stitch together the peace between the two peoples. A thing completely ignored in the Disney movie, because a magic tree gives her the power to talk to English people. Yeah, okay. Also, in the Disney version, John Smith is infinitely more attractive than the real-life John Smith, who looks more like the governor from the Disney movie. It's almost as if the Disney movie was written by Captain John Smith himself. No, it wasn't, but Captain John Smith did write a thing that I alluded to earlier, his book, which has the most best title ever given to a book. The General History of Virginia, New England, and the Summer Isles, with the names of the adventurers, planters, and governors from their first beginning, 1584, to this present, 1624, with the proceedings of those several colonies, and the accidents that befall them in all their journeys and discoveries. Also, the maps and descriptions of all those countries, their commodities, people, government, customs, and religion yet known, divided into 6 books by Captain John Smith, sometimes governor in those countries, and Admiral of New England. That's the title you settled on, Captain John Smith? Is this a joke? What kind of a title to a book is that? Did you start writing the book on the front cover on accident? Dude. Also, this entire title is written in Old English, which means general has two L's in it, and history is spelled with an E instead of a Y. Sometimes it's spelled with a Y, governor has some extra O's and U's, and six is spelled with an E at the end for some horrific reason, meaning I had to translate all that to modern English before attempting to read the title. And now, full disclaimer, I have not completely read through the general history of Virginia, New England, and the Summer Isles with the names of the adventurers, planters, and governors from their first beginning 1584 to this present 1624, with the proceedings of those several colonies and the accidents that befell them all in their countries and discoveries, also the maps and descriptions of all those countries, their commodities, people, government, customs, and religions yet known, divided into 6 books by Captain John Smith, sometimes governor of those countries and admiral of New England. Because I respect my time. What I have read, though, is quite manipulative. Captain John Smith probably knew that these stupid stories he was lying about were going to be seen right through. So what he did was write the entire book in third person. Although it's actually written in first person, but he just refers to himself as if he's some explorer studying the wondrous, handsome Captain John Smith, so he can describe himself in all sorts of positive ways without sounding like a narcissist, even though he 102% is. In addition to the infamous Pocahontas saving him with love at first sight garbage, there are also multiple instances of him straight up admitting to murdering Native Americans. How to defeat Captain John Smith at court? Bring his autobiography. Or I guess, if you want to respect him, call it a biography. His very transparent biography. Because he admits to plenty of crimes in it. But hey, this is an incredibly complicated story, with many sides, some sides lost to history, but thanks to the wonders of whatever dark magic historians do to figure out this stuff with the carbon dating or whatever, there is so much to learn about the story of Pocahontas and Captain John Smith. So I encourage you, go over to the library, find a book about Pocahontas, not written by Disney, and learn some about her. Watch a PBS documentary about Pocahontas. Ask your local talking tree about Pocahontas. But if you want good information, whatever you do, don't read the general history of Virginia, New England, and this. I'm not saying that again. And once you fill your brain with knowledge from all sorts of sources, like documentaries, talking squirrels, and library books, then you will know the real story of what happened about Pocahontas. So you can invite your friends over for a Pocahontas movie night, where you watch the Disney Pocahontas movies, and then every 5 minutes you say, actually, and you give a 10-minute lecture, thus extending the runtime, extending friend time. See, it was about love after all. This has been Billy Net Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Don't be a Captain John Smith. Love you. Good night.
Yes, Chuck? Oh no, I wasn't trying to initiate a conversation. I was just wondering, what's that you're reading? I'd like to answer that question, but I can't because I don't know what this is. If you don't know what this is, would you like to initiate a conversation discussing what it could possibly be? Smooth. Thank you. Alright, here, let's take a look. It seems to be a blue paper with a whole bunch of words written on it. Alright, not every observation's gonna be groundbreaking. This is a process. Hey, look at that, right there at the top. It says instructions. So obviously, now we know we're looking at an instruction sheet. Chuck, I know I'm looking at an instruction sheet. That's not the part I don't understand. The part I don't understand is what the instructions are saying. For example, right here. Do you know what this means? And? No, not and. This word, right next to and. I'm sorry if this sounds demeaning, but I think you might need to consult the glossary. Chuck, there is no glossary for this document. This is just a piece of paper I wrote last night, and I don't remember what it says. There is a bibliography, but that's also just my signature. Hey man, I'm just trying to help. There's no reason to get upset at me for not remembering what you wrote on a paper. Oh, Chuck, please do not be upset. I apologize. And I wouldn't want to ruin this lovely moment of forgiveness, but have you not noticed the fact your name is also on the paper, Chuck? Right under mine. Ah, crap, I hate responsibilities. Why couldn't I have signed your name instead? Chuck, you don't know how to spell my last name. Well, that's not my fault. I like writing things, not spelling. Okay, I know something that'll both make us happy. I'm gonna go out and get some food so we can sort this out later. I'm gonna quickly walk over there to get the stuff. You just sit here, relax, and be cute. Alright, too cute. Now how am I supposed to leave? Thank you. Out of all the people, why did it have to be you? Okay, alright, let's just make this quick. I have platonic needs to cater to, Nova. Counterpoint, I have no idea what that means. Also, you, giant squid robot, are violating the safety of this precious street. Okay, tell me. If someone were to drive down this street right now, What would be blocking them? Dude, I'm not even on the road. If you're gonna pull me over for something, at least make it something that I'm actually doing. I can tolerate you a lot more before you made that New Year's resolution to be more of a good superhero. Oh yeah, I have been doing an excellent job keeping that resolution. Hey, you! Yeah, you, in the car. What are you doing going 50? This is a 45 zone. Respect the speed limit. It's always jerks like you who cause disruptions like this, so nobody can enjoy any peace or order. You, over there, are you littering? I will destroy you. Ah, thank you for noticing, Giant Squid Robot. I have been taking my job more seriously recently. I mean, there are just so many criminals out there, and it's just, well, you know. Yeah. Alright, Nova. I suggest we play a game to continue with this whole apprehending process. Okay, Giant Robot, I'll catch on to your game. I am a fan of games. One time I did blow up a marina. That was kind of like Battleship. Please don't cut to that. Okay, Nova, here are the rules to my game. You are the stander. Your job is simply to stand here until I get back so we can actually start the game. And I will hide, but don't try looking for me until I call out for you. Okay? Ah, sounds fun. Alright, I'm quite patient. I can wait a few minutes while you go and hide. Ah, good dog. Thank you. Okay, Supernova, I'll see you in a few minutes. Just stick around. This will be worth it, I assure you. Of course it will. If you can't trust a giant squid robot, who can you trust?
Hello, welcome to Billy Net Joe's Rant. Today, I'd like to do something I haven't done in a little while. A common question as far as drawing on Scratch goes is, how do you get something that's transparent? And I don't mean a gradient that goes from nothing to a color, because that's not fully transparent. That's translucent at best. And so you could stack two gradients on top of each other with flipped gradients, so one's pulsing out and one's pulsing inward, but then it looks a bit silly, because it's only the outer rim that's actually transparent. The rest is just more or less a solid color. Yeah, see, take a look at this. You can clearly see that the center and edges of the screen are darker than everywhere else. Not visually appealing, in my opinion. Had this been 2 years earlier, I definitely would have been eager to try and create my own version of getting a fully transparent color on Scratch. But this was not 2 years ago, and I no longer care as much about Scratch as I did back then, as far as talking about it on this show. So in that time, people have already found a way to get a fully transparent color. What you do is you take a gradient, you color it on vector, switch over to bitmap, and then just use the select tool to select the part of the gradient that's fully transparent. And that's literally it. A pretty simple solution, but what I found while trying to find this solution that already was solved was also pretty interesting. And just to prove that I know how to do it, this is what the fully transparent thing looks like. Not very dark, but you could always just stack more on top of each other to make them darker. All I did was I did the same thing that other example was using. I made a gradient and then converted it to bitmap, but instead of just color selecting it, I shrunk the gradient down all the way so that it was basically just one pixel on the screen. Then I went back to vector and sized the gradient back up, and what do you know? But take a look at this. This is what I discovered. I call it the veiling technique, as it creates a veiling effect. So it's basically just the gradient, but with not as much gradients. It's the standard gradient effect, but a whole lot more blocky, so you can actually see all of the shades of gradient. And in my horsing around with the whole switching from vector to bitmap thing, I discovered that if you take a solid body color, shrink it down in bitmap, and then enlarge it back up in vector, then you get the same effect, but, circular, since I used the circle tool. However, these objects are quite dangerous, as if you convert back to bitmap while you're already from vector, then they get a horrific blur effect, and are no longer useful for that whole selecting tool. But if you want really blurry effects without, knowing how to do really blurry effects, well, now you do know how to do blurry effects. Thank you. I mean, you're welcome. Man, how could I mess up thank you and you're welcome? That's like saying all rectangles are squares, but not all squares are rectangles. And that's ignoring the 4 takes it said to say that previous sentence, because I kept saying the correct thing. I'm getting my squares all tilted and wrong. I'm rhombusing. This is not good. And while we're on the topic of random geometry garbage, did you know that a trapezoid is not a rectangle or a square? It's actually a heretical triangle during the medieval period. Wait, wouldn't that make all rectangles trapezoids, but not all trapezoids rectangles? Does the square rectangle situation actually work for multiple different four-sided geometrical figures? Quadrilaterals, that's the word. But hey, don't take my word for it. Without rectangles, I don't have a leg to stand on. The funny thing about rectangles is if you take one and sand down all the sides, so that instead of sides, it now has, like, circular corners. It no longer has 4 corners, does it? So, what does that make it, huh? It's not a rectangle, because a rectangle needs to have 4 sides, 4 corners. All of which being a 90 degrees. Because if you add 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, then that equals 360 degrees. And all quadrilaterals have to equal 360 degrees because, well, I don't know actually, because when you think 360, you think circle. But when you think circle, you certainly don't think rectangle, because they're the complete opposite. Assuming that the rectangle you're talking about is a square. Because a rectangle is kind of in the middle of being a rectangle and being a circle, but it's also kind of a square too, because of the whole square rectangle thing. Strange. Why don't you run that one through your medulla oblongata? Was that joke confusing and complicated enough to end off this episode? I think so. This has been Billy Netto's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Oh boy, I really love nighttime. It's my favorite time of the year. Day. Although I guess year would make more sense because the day is day, but night, there are 360 something nights a year. I just love the smell of nighttime.
Hey Billy, I was just wondering, have you ever thought about Billy?
It's not okay to scare someone when they're sniffing. I almost got a sniff of my own lungs.
I don't think you're missing out on much, really, because smell is linked to taste, and you don't look like the kind of person who'd like eating lungs. Anyway, what I was going to say is, you ever find the concept of pain kind of counterproductive? Because the whole point of pain is saying, hey, body, stop doing that, it's painful. But then again, if the pain keeps going on, it makes it harder to get out of the painful situation because you are in pain. I just think that was sort of strange. Yeah, that crossed my mind yesterday when I had my foot stuck in a bear trap.
That is an interesting point, and I think it has something to do with evolution being far slower than the industrial production of the world, making the world a safer place each day. And if people were to evolve past the point of needing pain, then I think it would take quite a long time to get to that point. Sorry, why do you have your foot stuck in a bear trap? Who's laying those things?
Surprisingly, no one, actually, which was quite disappointing, as I wanted to find a bear trap so I could see how they work. Because I always heard about them and how they, like, snap clothes and stuff, but I just wanted to see it in person. And those darn museums never actually let you try out the traps, they just show them to you. If I want to go to the Natural History Museum just to stick my head in a brazen bowl, I think I should be allowed to. And I suppose the next worst thing would be like the bathrooms, but everywhere has those. There's no point of going to a museum.
Creamy, I have a legitimate question to ask you. And it may offend you, but I don't mean any harm. Are you real? Because you always just seem to come out of nowhere and say the most outlandish things I've ever heard. And that's not a bad thing. I think these stories are entertaining, but, like, I'm not 100% sure you're not a figment of my imagination.
Billy, I get that from everyone. It's just the kind of person I am. When you walk up to someone and it's like, is this guy even real? I'm not sure entirely. I kind of wish I was a figment. Billy Nutjoe, if I were a figment, I could do so many things that I could not do right now. If I were a figment, the first thing I would do is I'd take a huge bag of popcorn kernels and sprinkle them all along the sidewalk on a hot day. So that way, while people are walking by, they can get free floor popcorn if they're brave enough. The second thing I would do on that same hot day would be take a giant fan and follow people around, orbit them with the fan, cooling them down, as an apology for the popcorn thing earlier. It would be even more efficient, because if I were a figment, I could fly, Billy. I could fly better. I could fly without using my wings.
That is an interesting rhetorical question. If you were something that didn't exist and could do whatever you want. Which is actually something I don't think I can answer right now. Because the first thing that comes to mind is just, keeping people company. Because if you can do whatever you want, you could keep anyone company. You could keep company someone in Canada and someone in India at the exact same time. Because you don't exist and you could do whatever you want. It's quite interesting. You could paint with your eyeballs. You could collide hadrons with your hands. You could run at the speed of light or at the pace of a snail. It doesn't matter. You could do whatever you want. I don't know. The first thing I would do, probably, is fly on over to the moon and take a look-see. See if there's anything actually worth noting. Because it would be kind of a waste to spend billions of dollars going to the moon when maybe Mars was more interesting. After that, I'd probably go explore some caves, because, as someone who does exist, exploring caves is very scary, as caves are hard to find. And once you do find a cave, they're huge and vast and full of water, which means you could die of hypothermia, and also crawling through small holes, which I am not good at. Nor would I like to be good at that, because that is, as I said, scary. But for someone who does not exist, it would not be that scary, because you could just walk through the walls. Take a look at all the stalagmites and stalactites, and, rocks. On second thought, maybe a cave wasn't very interesting. At least not caves around here, I don't think. Though I've never seen a cave around here, or a cave anywhere else, so who knows the differences. Although if movies with people with outstanding abilities like that are anything to go off of, then I don't think I would want to be a figment, because then you'd probably just be captured by some government and forced to write off taxes or something. Because you certainly can't dissect a figment, so might as well put it to work.
Hooray for not existing! And as much as I like carrying conversations with you, Billy, I have to leave now because of an appointment.
Is this some sort of crazy robot tank speed race judging appointment?
No, it's just a dentist appointment.
Oh. I also go there sometimes. Yeah, I'm not really feeling a conversation sparking from that one. So this has been Billy Netro's Rant, something, brush your teeth. Hey, happy Valentine's Day, Jelly. I'm quite surprised no previous communication was needed for this whole white and pink makeup thing. Although I guess that's not too surprising, considering this is the third year in a row that we've done this. 3 years. Yeah, wow. What was I doing 3 years ago? Oh right, the exact same thing I'm doing right now. Great. Anyway, so Valentine's Day. What is there to say about it now? Well, I can think of a few things. Valentine's Day is always in February. Much like the Super Bowl, a thing that happened not too long ago. Which is quite ironic, considering the fact that the Super Bowl was pretty much made to divide people in the sports world, while Valentine's Day it's a holiday celebrating togetherness. Quite unfortunate to Valentine's, those oval throwers are always ruining things. Who won the Super Bowl? I have no idea. I don't know anything about Super Bowls, except for the fact that for some reason, companies always seem to want to make the most extravagant and high-quality million-dollar movie budget ads all the time for the Super Bowl. Like, sure, you're showing it to the millions of people who are watching, but you know what other group of millions of people watch TV? Non-sports enjoyers. Just normal people watching TV. Not saying that sports enjoyers are not normal, but let's be honest, sports enjoyers, they seem to be pretty not normal because they get this extra treatment. Why can't all ads have a bazillion-dollar budget? Is this just for the live reaction of all the people in the giant bowl, the Super Bowl? Is there a special compartment in the Super Bowl where all the owners of all these ad companies watch through to see everyone's live reaction to their amazing advertisements? I don't know. I'm obviously not a commercialist. Oh wait, I think I just solved my own conundrum. The reason that ads don't always have a 17,000 quinductillion, I'm sure that's a number, dollar budget all the time is because how would the companies turn a profit? Sure, millions of people will see the ad, but what percentage of those millions will actually go forth with whatever product is being pushed? I don't know, maybe like 15, 20%? It's quite a pessimistic number, but the point of making a Super Bowl ad, not really to promote the product, is just to provide something fun. Who else really needs to be turning a profit in February? Why, candy companies, of course. Because, after all, there are a whole bunch of people in the market for a cardboard heart with a whole bunch of, caramels and stuff inside. So who's providing to that market of people? Why, the candy companies. And so they get all their pink and white cardboard folded up in their giant cardboard heart folding machine, and then start sporadically putting in the candies. Because, take a look at this. I'm sure I've said in the past before that having a job counting out the exact number of foodstuffs in a specific bin must be a pretty miserable job, but it seems during the Valentine's season they just stopped caring. Because look, right here, it says, instead of the normal, approximately 20 count, no, instead it says about 17, maybe 15, a minimum 12, I suppose 10, maybe 11. Have you tried shaking the box to guess how many candies are inside? Because I'm not going to do it for you. Of course, some candy brands have it a whole lot easier than others. Chocolate brands like, M&M's, Snickers, and, Animal Crackers, they all have it easy. Because they just have one flavor, chocolate, Change the outer shell to be white, or pink, or purple, if you're feeling a bit out of the ordinary, and boom, you got it done. Meanwhile, the fruity companies, like, Skittles, Starburst, and, some third example, I'm not good at coming up with threes, they have flavors associated with the colors. And I already know that Starburst has pink Starburst, so I guess they could just sell those. But what are Skittles going to do? Come up with an entire new flavor to be sold just in February? They've probably already done that, but it seems like a whole lot more work than just changing a color. Flip a switch on a machine? Get over to the boardroom. We need to discover the next kind of pink flavor. What kind of pink things could we put in this? Cactus flower? Sure, why not? Junior Mints, a company with the texture of a fruity and the look of a chocolatey candy, have done something very interesting. You know how the inside of a candies are usually white? Well, now they're red, also known as the least Valentine's Day color out of the Valentine's Day palette. I'm not eating glue, I'm eating blood. And just to prove my point that red is the least appealing Valentine's Day color, Jelly, just hold this. This is for you, by the way. I'll be back in a second just to, let me change. See? Look how ridiculous and out of place this looks. I'd like to take this short time to apologize to any red fans, as your color is cute and Valentine-y. I was poorly mistaken. I suppose red would be popular with any Valentine realists who don't like the depiction of hearts as pink, as in real life, hearts are meat-colored, as am I. This has been Billy Netjo's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed, love and candy, and love for candy, and love for loving for candy, and for candy love for. Hello, welcome to Billy Netjo's Rant, and today I want to talk about elements. And I don't mean the pre-elements, like fire, earth, water, or air. I'm talking about the periodical table of elements, known for its many periods, and columns, and rows, and sub-rows. Ooh. One quick note on those proto-elements. It's common knowledge of the whole fire, air, earth, water thing, but you know that there are actually 4 sub-classical elements inside of these elements. Or I guess Shakespearean elements. Hot, dry, wet, and cold. And now, I'm sure scientists today shun the whole idea of half of these elements being compounds, but the other half are also adjectives. And I can understand fire and earth together make dry, but water and earth make cold? This must have been written before volcanic hot springs existed, or was just written in a place where there were no volcanic hot springs. And also, water and air make wet. Okay, I can kind of see that, but water and anything make wet. I'm not sure what the word for, vaporous? Or maybe that would be water and fire. I don't know, this whole system didn't really make it as far as the periodic table did. But I gotta give some credit. All of these words are used in science today, though not as commonly as they were back then. And it is a good starting point, because of the whole fact that it took, 2,000 years from the start of discovering an atom to actually figuring out what it looks like. Everyone's gotta start somewhere. But instead of bullying really old guys for drawing some rectangles in a formation, let's instead talk about the periodic table of elements, and all the fun things it has.
Excuse me, Billy, have you seen a small spring-like component anywhere around here? Because I was working on something that involves springs, quite a few of them actually, and, well, springs bounce. This one, a lot.
I don't think so. I haven't seen any springs around here. A few bottles, maybe, but no springs. Also, what happened to your hand? That doesn't look good.
Oh, this, I'm fine. Don't worry. It was in good intentions. Much like how you celebrate Valentine's Day, we do it a little differently. Finally, I've written the perfect Valentine's Day card. Now, if only there was a festive way to deliver it. Fly, my dove! But if you haven't seen the spring, I guess I'll be leaving now.
Sure, you could leave and go play with springs, but right now I'm talking about the periodic table of elements. I assume that's a topic that interests you.
Yes, that does interest me, but I've been playing with springs for a long time now, and I just need to get this done. I'm sure you can understand. And that's ignoring the fact that my reputation as the bad guy will definitely be diminished by standing near you for longer than 30 seconds. So, goodbye.
Okay, goodbye then. Tell Chuck I said hello. Where was I? Oh yeah, periodic table. Now I could talk about some super nerdy things, like how rounding elements and their amount in a compound, up or down, is kind of breaking the rules of nature, considering the fact that matter cannot be created or destroyed. But instead, I'm going to talk about something a bit more relatable and fun. Because the periodic table of elements is kind of like those fridge magnets with all the letters and symbols, so you can combine them together to make fun words. Except for some of the elements, there are 2 letters in one. Like bromine. is Br, and iron is Fe for some reason, probably a Latin reason. For an on-topic Valentine's Day example, I could say uranium, copper, tellurium. Or if you're stranded on an island, sulfur, oxygen, sulfur. Those are the only two examples I can come up with at the top of my head, because I am good at escaping desert islands and calling people cute. Some of these elements even have quite fun names. For example, Seaborgium, which not only sounds like a funny word, but also kind of sounds like cyborg. And who doesn't love robots? Also, manganese, which has an equally fun name. And then there are the more generic ones like potassium, whose icon is for some reason a K, despite the fact that potassium is one of the more common elements, so you'd think it would get first dibs on all the P names, but I guess not. And then there are the really popular elements, like calcium, which may not be a great example for the first example when I'm talking about really common elements, but calcium, that's the stuff that it strengthens your bones, and without bones, you'd be like a jellyfish. Quite pathetic. Then there's oxygen. I love oxygen. It's my favorite thing to put in my nose. And then there's also hydrogen, which seems, for some reason, to be like the kryptonite to mammals. And I'm quite disappointed in us mammals, because we can't breathe water, even though water is 1 hydrogen and 2 oxygen. You'd think with that much oxygen you'd be able to breathe it, but throw 1 hydrogen in there and everything's ruined. Now, I'm no scubologist, but I don't think it would be stupid to say that oxygen tanks are kind of like mammal hydrogen filters, so that we can breathe like fishes, except out of a metal tube. That metal tube might just be made of aluminum, another element. Although, aluminum isn't exactly the strongest metal, and oxygen tanks have to go under a lot of pressure, so maybe not aluminum, but still, excellent segue to aluminum. However, be sure to keep in mind that my only experiences with aluminum are aluminum foil, which I can tear with my hands. So maybe it is stronger in thicker amounts. Maybe it's like a spider web, where everyone says it's like, whoa, this is the most stable thing in the entire world, that just brush it away. And of course, spider and ant defenders are saying, well, actually, they are like the strongest animal. It's just that they're really small. And if their strength ratio and size were a bit larger, then they would definitely be the strongest animal, if they were the same size as you and me. To which I respond, they ain't. And you scientists better not be planning on making them any bigger. Because as soon as those scientists start inventing kaiju spiders, I'm just gonna give up on science completely and go over to my boy Plato, where we can study the element wet. This has been Billy Necho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Whew, wow, it's pretty chilly today. Well, I suppose we might as well squeeze all the winter we can out of winter while winter still lasts, as soon it will be spring, as today's date is 2/20/2023. Wow, isn't that a fun number? Not only that, this is episode 220 on 2/20/2023. I'm sure the however many dozen people are born today will enjoy being born on such a fun numbered date. While I'm sure not everyone will agree that numbers are fun, I'm sure a vast majority of people will agree that I say money involving numbers is fun. So let's talk about money. Whoever's job it was to design and decide what gets to go on the various different kinds of bills is undoubtedly a stressful one, as there are all sorts of famous figures or locations that you could put on those currencies. The specific famous figure on the United States $1 bill is George Washington, which makes sense because he was the first president, so I guess it would make sense for him to be on the $1 bill. Fun fact that I did not know, there is actually a $2 bill, supposedly. I assume it was discontinued on the fact that it's redundant and pointless, but apparently the $2 bill featured Thomas Jefferson, the third president. So I guess this is not a structure they will be following for the rest of the bills. On the $5 bill, there's Abraham Lincoln, a much more well-known president on the bills, because 5 is for some reason used more often than 10 in my experiences, which I guess makes sense, because 5 prices are often split into multiples of 5. You don't often buy things for like $23, you buy things for $25. So you could take a 20 and a 5, perfectly segmenting into the $20 bill, featuring some guy called Andrew Jackson. Who is Andrew Jackson? I have no idea. The only time I've ever heard of Andrew Jackson was reading the $20 bill's description and inquiring on who the heck Andrew Jackson is. Probably a president at some period of time. Oops, I guess I skipped the $10 bill, featuring Alexander Hamilton. I think he was named after a play. And then there's the $50 bill, featuring Ulysses S. Grant. That's the longest name so far, featuring a middle name, because I guess there were too many people named Ulysses Grant when he was in relevance. And I am aware, of course, unlike in the case of Andrew Jackson, who Ulysses Grant is, he was the guy who won the Civil War, thanks for that. And I guess as a reward, he was a president and on the $50 bill, which is more impressive than most people can say, I guess. But so far, every single person on these bills has been a president. Even the one on the $2 bill, which was not really used that much. Surely the dude on the $100 bill will be an even better president. $100 featuring Benjamin Franklin. Come on, we were so close. Nearly every bill had a president, but Benjamin Franklin's not a president. He was a founding father, which I guess is kind of like president before president, but come on. That's misleading. If someone looks at the United States bills and sees all these presidents, everyone's a president, $100, Benjamin Franklin, he must have been a president at some point, right? Wrong. In the however many presidents there have been, 50, maybe? 53, 4, 5, I don't know. But in all this time, Benjamin Franklin was never a president, because he was only alive for like the first 3 or 4, I assume. Unless the 100th president in the future will be robotic Benjamin Franklin, in which case the prophecy is fulfilled. But until that happens, this is just a lie. For the sake of completion, I'd love to look over all the presidents on the coins, but if I'm going to be honest, these are really small, and all these people look more or less the same. I can tell Abraham Lincoln's there because of his beard. He doesn't have his hat in any of these depictions, which is quite disappointing. And I guess this one's George Washington. There's got to be a George Washington there somewhere. He was on the $1 bill, so it only makes sense that he's on something that adds up to a $1 bill. Because Washington plus Washington plus Washington plus Washington plus Washington equals slightly bigger Washington. I would also like to talk about every single type of currency and every single thing depicted on all of them, but as you can already tell, I don't even know the names or faces of all the presidents, so there's no way I know whoever's on the Canadian 17 and a quarter dollar bill. But there are some fictional forms of money that have some pretty high values. For example, in the board game The Game of Life, in which you take control of a small peg and live its entire life in about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how many people you're playing with, and how good your banker is with counting out thousands of dollars. But the bills in The Game of Life are pretty huge. They range from $5,000 to $500,000. What famous Game of Life characters are depicted on them? Well, the spinner, and also the number value that the bill is. Not very interesting. But hey, then again, there are about a bazillion versions of the Game of Life, about as many as there are Monopoly. So, some of them do have characters depicted. Who can forget the brave political actions of Guy with golf clubs? I usually try to go off my brain to remember what things I've said before so I don't accidentally repeat myself and make points I've already made before. But I think it's appropriate at this point to ask, what's the progress on that Harriet Tubman $20 bill? Because I definitely know who Harriet Tubman is. I have no idea who Johnson Jackwell, or whoever that other guy was. I've been hearing about this Harriet Tubman $20 bill for like 10 years now, and nothing's happened. The wonderful world of legislature, where everything takes longer than it should. Oh wait, I just remembered who the $20 bill guy is. He was the guy who kicked out all those Native Americans. Of course. How could I forget? That's the only thing we learned about him in school. Yeah, not exactly a good candidate for currency. Now, I definitely don't want to get political, but is a guy whose only notable accomplishment being a jerk really that good? Because in school, we learned a whole lot about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and all the stuff he did. $20 bill guy, we learn one thing and move on. Heck, the guy right before FDR, Herbert Hoover, one of the least popular presidents in history, was more interesting than $20 bill guy. And for all the stupid things that Herbert Hoover did, he was not rewarded with his face on money. FDR would have been a better candidate for the $20 bill, but unfortunately I think it was too late by the time he was president because the spot was already taken. And if it takes like 10 years to redesign the bill today, imagine how long it must have taken all the way back in World War II times. I mean, geez, it was during the Great Depression. They couldn't even spend money, let alone redesign it. But you know what? Forget all those other presidents and everyone else and all that money stuff. Because they're nothing compared to the true main characters of money. Eagle holding shield, plant, and arrows. Also, eyeball pyramid thing. Now those are the true good characters. Those two being from the hit art piece, back of $1 bill, featuring the word one in giant text in the middle, surrounded by the two previously said characters. The other bills also have things on the back, but they're mostly just like locations in the United States, Washington bill signing division, just a whole lot of places with pillars. There's lots of pillars and domes and spikes. I don't know why there are so many spikes. Isn't this supposed to be a fun place where paper is signed? However, I would like to give specific attention to the $5 bill featuring Abraham Lincoln, as on the back it has the Lincoln Memorial, which I guess makes enough sense. However, the back design is sort of ruined by the strange giant pink 5 in the bottom right corner, even though all the other corners have normal 5s, but just the bottom right has a giant pink 5 for some reason. Out of all the bills, the $1 bill is definitely my favorite. I mean, you could just zoom in really, really far into it and still see a whole bunch of little details, a whole bunch of lines strung together into triangles. If the $1 bill were a bridge, it would be a very secure bridge. This has been Billy Net Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed.